Before just opening up, I mentioned other parliamentarians will be joining us. I think I saw David Davis and Suella Braverman come in, former ministers as well. So welcome to the conference. Suella will be chairing, I think, the panel after the coffee. But now we have 10 minutes to open this up with questions. Any points to Paul or Cahill, please? Anybody want to have a view? Yes, Peter Foster from the Daily Telegraph.
I am curious about the point about the narrowness of the interpretation of the Good Friday Agreement, because both in the Article 50 litigation and the Miller case, I think I'm right in saying that the High Court and the Supreme Court took a very narrow view, and I'm pretty sure the Irish government takes a pretty narrow view, and therefore, do we not get back to the fact that a lot of the stuff based on this report is based on a non-narrow view that is currently not supported in the courts? I'm not saying it couldn't be expanded, but it means that a lot of the stuff that here is founded on what is not currently the case.
Okay, I think I'll ask Paul to...
well, it is currently the case that the Good Friday Agreement, which I'm carrying with me, says that North-South cooperation requires, quote-unquote, the explicit endorsement of the Northern Ireland Assembly. That is the case. It's in the text. I haven't just said it would be nice if it did. It actually says it. It is currently the case. That was not at all an issue in the Miller case. The Miller case is a totally separate, and the High Court were a totally separate series of issues. This was not germane to it. Nobody really disputes the fact that the key to getting the deal was to get Northern Irish Unionists to sign up. And actually, it's wrong. It's actually voted in. But the key to get the majority of that political community to sign up was that definition of North-South cooperation. And I think it's perfectly right for Cahill to say we must remember that the Irish people made a generous gesture in changing their constitution. They stretched themselves to do that. But the Unionists stretched themselves to say we can no longer talk anymore about an internal power sharing settlement for Northern Ireland. There must be an all-Ireland dimension. So what you're effectively saying is they stretched themselves to bring about this compromise. They still feel strongly about it, that was what they did and what they believe in. And you're saying, I don't really care. That's actually one of the problems with the way that the references to the Good Friday Agreement work in this text. So people talk all the time about protecting it, but for example, I think I'm right in saying, and I absolutely accept the majority of people in Northern Ireland voted to remain, as I did, and I absolutely accept that there is a double problem here, that Northern Irish nationalists feel that their European citizenship has been weakened, not been destroyed for a variety of reasons, but has been weakened by you can't dispute that, by Brexit. There is a double problem here, and both must be faced up to. But it's an extremely dangerous thing to say to one political community, you went for this particular settlement, which says North-South cooperation depends on the explicit endorsement. The reason why agriculture and animal health is the top is I know perfectly well that it was chosen. The reason why it's in here, again in the text, is because, and why Food Safety Board is the next thing then very rapidly set up as an implementation body, is that these were chosen for things which were seen not to be purely pragmatic. Only the craziest people, but people like me worked at this argument, only the craziest people in the world would be allergic about this sort of thing. It's common sense. That's the reason why they have that check. It's extremely dangerous to say, actually, you thought you made this deal, the text says you made this deal, but I don't care. It's an extremely dangerous position to adopt. You must also remember the very, very large percentage of people who voted for parties and groups who supported the Brady Amendment in Northern Ireland. Very, very high percentage.
Okay, thank you. I also should welcome Viscount Trenchard as well from the Lords. I couldn't see earlier behind the pillar. But I've got a further question. We're running out of time a little bit, but I will take at least one more question from John Campbell, the BBC Northern Ireland correspondent. John.
Hi. I was just wondering for Paul and Cahill, would they agree with what seems to be the view of this report, that it's somehow easier to negotiate the all-new UK-Ireland SPS novel arrangement rather than being able to negotiate an extension of the Larne SPS agreement? Because that would seem to be the implication.
I mean, if you look at the essence of the Good Friday Agreement, for example, is that it didn't specify technical trade or economic issues. In fact, if you read the document, I think it refers to economy once, and economic never, trade never. And for that specific reason, because those were issues that agreement could not have been reached. And those technical issues were kicked down to subsequent agreements at St Andrews, Stormont House, Acts of Parliament, etc., etc. Perhaps what this document, in terms of the alternative arrangements, is doing is bringing forward or bringing closer to the point of a decision the technical issues that are often kicked far down the road with political agreements. So if we're being truthful, the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration was a political decision by the European Union with negotiations with Theresa May, the British government. But of course there were always going to be the very things that you referenced, John. How do we figure these out in that transition period? And I think this type of document allows maybe that 6 month of a gap between the deferment of the exit date does allow for a deeper look at the technical aspects of this and how it's just not feasible to replicate the Larne scenario, for example, with any level of certainty that deals with all of the other issues.
Very briefly, just I don't know. Well, as you asked me.
Okay, and a quick answer from Paul, and then I can squeeze in one more question after that.
I'll be very quick. I mean, I was happy with what Shankar said this morning. These are 3 options currently under discussion. I'll add something else, that I am utterly convinced that in terms of getting a final settlement here, the DUP will have to move on its position about trade between Great Britain, or its formal position between Great Britain and Northern Ireland coming in from Great Britain. But Shankar at the moment is making it quite clear this is one of 3 options, and he explained very fully this morning as to why he thinks what he thinks, and I have no problem with that.
And a final question from the lady here at the front.
Okay. Is there a mic?
Yes, here it is, yes.
Thank you. Dr. Anna Bailey, I work on briefings for Brexit with Dr. Gudgeon, who I believe can't be here today. Still working?
Yeah, this works fine. Yeah, thank you.
Do you think we need to distinguish conceptually between protecting the Good Friday Agreement and protecting the peace process? Because they're often spoken about in the same breath, but obviously the peace process has spent 20 years evolving since the Good Friday Agreement, and the set of things contained within it are much larger than the narrower set of the Good Friday Agreement. And do you think we even have agreement between all the parties concerned as to what exactly we're trying to protect?
Okay, very good question. Quick answers, please.
The answer is there is no agreement. There's a political fudge that everyone has agreed we need to protect the peace process. If you scratch back, what does that mean? You get very different answers. In fact, the answers would shock. So protect the peace process means protect the union. Protect the peace process means lead to a united Ireland. And protect the peace process means have a unity referendum. Protect the peace process means stay in the EU. Like it means everything and it means nothing. So you're right. It is a little bit of a catch-all, but aspirationally, it's there as perhaps a rallying cry to those who are not as engaged in politics, that all of these things are part of an overall process. And they do give political cover to our political leaders who often don't live up to the aspirations of the Good Friday Agreement.
Final word from Paul.
Bluntly, I don't think we'll avoid a no-deal Brexit unless we have a better translation and a shared understanding between the EU in whatever form of document, the EU and the United Kingdom, about what protecting the Good Friday Agreement means and what that involves. And on March the 12th, Steve Barclay, who was here earlier in the Hansard reply to a question of William Rees-Mogg, indicated that the UK government did believe there are possibility of significant tensions. The idea that it's an easy fit, which pervades the withdrawal agreement, is not the case. So we are going to have a translation and a shared understanding of what the protection of the Good Friday Agreement is, particularly when it is possible, I say only possible, that you could define the backstop as tending to draw away functions from it and to suck the life out of it. So we need to have a shared understanding between the United Kingdom and the EU about what protecting the Good Friday Agreement really means.
Okay, thank you all very much indeed. Round of applause for our panellists.